Hello, 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 and welcome to Property Game Changers Live. We are live on the Property Game Changers Facebook group. So grab your coffee, I'm coffee this week, or glass of wine, and join us as we're in conversation with people who've changed the game in property. We're celebrating the power of ethical property investing to really change lives. We're debunking the myth that you need a lot of money to get started in property. And as always, we're inspiring each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. And I am super excited about our guest on Property Game Changers this evening. We have got the charismatic, the enigmatic Mr. Aaron Yahaya. And Aaron is a Guinness World Record keynote speaker and award-winning entrepreneur with over 20 years business experience over multiple different areas: hospitality, retail, publishing, learning, and of course, property development. Today, Aaron works with individuals and institutional investors to really help them to optimize their investments. And I met Aaron last year, and I'm constantly amazed by the depth of his thinking, his killer one-liners, and the fact that when Aaron tells you a story, you feel it in your soul. Aaron has achieved a phenomenal amount, yet is incredibly humble. You only hear about the various achievements after a while. And so I'm really excited to introduce to the show Property Game Changer, Mr. Aaron Yahaya.
So thank you so much for that, Steph. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Give me a little bit of a wave. So I was actually listening to your introduction and thinking, who's that? Like, you know, and should I ever need anything? I'm thinking about enhancing my power team constantly. Should I need you to speak to the credit people at the bank for my next deal? I know exactly who I'm going to be bringing out. So is there a bit of an echo your side?
No. If you've got some earphones handy, you can put them, because it will be in the recording if you can hear it.
So I'll probably put my headphones in.
Okay. And I've got mine to hand if I need them. What I want to do, Aaron, is I've starting in the middle. So, because for many of us, there's that moment where you think, I want to change my life in some way, and property is part of that picture. Was there a moment like that for you, or was it a more gradual thing?
That's a really, really good question, Stephanie. In terms of, was there an aha moment when it came to property? And honestly, there wasn't. Almost back. So it wasn't, you know, I survived, I'm still here. And I just want to explain
how. Sorry, I can't hear you, Aaron. Is the thing plugged in properly? The speaker,
Right, okay. So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so fantastic. So let me just start that again. I fell into property backwards, and I didn't have an aha moment. What I was more interested in was changing the outcomes of the people around me by any means necessary, by any means possible. And I got into business. So my background is in economics. So I was, you know, that's what I did at degree level. And so I saw property as an asset class. And I would love to say I had a romantic affiliation with property, but I didn't. And as I used to say to some of my mentees, I didn't go home and start licking bricks. And if you do that, you know, I'm not going to judge. That's good, but that's just not me. And I think it's important that property is for everyone. You got to love the process. That's the way I look at it. And if you love property, then that's also good for you as well.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about the lead up. So how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Who is Aaron?
I can see you're quite. So I'm Aaron Yahaya. So we'll start with my name first, which is a bit. I grew up. I was born in the UK, and the reason why I put that is I grew up partly in the UK. Then I also grew up for a while in Nigeria, and I grew up for a while as well in Ireland. I went to 6 different secondary schools.
Wow.
And across 3 countries. And so I'm one of 15.
Wow.
15 siblings. I'm bang in the middle. I'm number 6. And so those are a few things which I'm sure you never knew before this conversation in the first minute. So, but predominantly in my teenage years, I grew up in South London. So in Croydon, quite close to Croydon, Wallington, I went to a decent school there. And I first started in business. I started off as a promoter. So I was doing a promoter, putting on raves, putting under 18 raves on. That's how I got into business. We're in the same group, friends of mine, doing other stuff and finding other entrepreneurial ways of moving things in school. I've got to be kind of careful because this is obviously there for posterity. So did that, put raves on. We're doing loads of under 18 raves, doing stuff, working with pirate radio stations, putting on a lot of garage, and then went to uni and continued that. So that's how I started to come into property. But I'm sure we can expand on that as it goes in. So that's who I am. So as far as my other personal thing, even though it's not super related to property, so I was brought up in a Muslim family. I'm Christian, and half my family is Muslim, half my family is Christian, even though that's not property. But those are just other things in terms of the makeup as to how I think and what everyone else sort of does. So everyone else in my family is doing various things. So we've got engineers, doctors, other economists, and so a wide range, bankers, accountants. So there's a lot of lively conversation, lively debate in between sort of fields and religion and just ages, and it's quite exciting.
Wow, I'm totally intrigued. So 14 siblings, or is it 15 siblings actually, in family of 15?
Yeah, so we're 14, and even though we're 15 siblings, even though we're 14, unfortunately I lost one of my brothers a few years back, but he still counts in the number, and so yeah.
So before we move on, I can't leave there because I need to know. 15 children, but what was the bomb in that? Was some are Muslim and some are Christian. So
are you asking if my mother had them all? No.
Oh, right. Okay.
Well, there are no for my mother. So this was across a couple of marriages. That's a whole different show.
Okay.
I mean, thank God for WhatsApp. We're all in a WhatsApp group and we all communicate, and we're also spread across the globe as well.
Wow. And I just want to picture you now in Croydon, growing up as a boy. And so how many of your siblings lived with you at home there?
Just one.
Ah, right.
Just one. And my parents separated, and just myself and my brother lived with my mum.
Okay. So, okay. I had you there.
The picture goes in.
Yeah, the picture's gone.
So when I was younger, we were plentiful. Yeah. And then when my parents got divorced, myself and my brother lived with my mother. So I have this big family. And then also I've got the IC3 male single mother South London experience. So so this was the thing. So to give it a little bit of context is, I was born here. So, my dad was at Oxford. He was working at John Radcliffe, was a really sort of bright doctor. And he was a wave of people who decided they were going to go back to Nigeria to rebuild and to put a lot of effort, in there. And so that's how I ended up going back to Nigeria for a period. I went to an international school, an American international school, for a lot of my primary schooling. So then I went back to Nigeria. And then my mother worked for a bank, and she was also across a couple of offices. So she was always, in between the UK and Nigeria. And when our parents divorced, I came back to live permanently in the UK via Ireland.
Ireland?
So, yeah. So, because originally what was actually going to happen is I wasn't actually going to come back to the UK, and because I had an aunt who was in Ireland, so I went to stay with my aunt for a period while all of this stuff was kicking off, and so then she was in Ireland, and that is basically how I ended up in Ireland, and yeah.
I was going to say, how long were you there for, and what was the experience like?
So I was in Ireland for about a year and a half, and it was Irish, I suppose. I mean, the best way to describe it is, I was in Dublin, a place called Stillorgan, Upper Kilmacud Road. I went to a place called Oatlands College. So if you notice, even when I'm speaking about it, the Irish sort of comes out a little bit. But sorry, if you're Irish watching this, you'll probably think, what on earth am I talking about? So Ireland, it was a different experience. And the best way to describe Dublin is it's like a cross between London and Manchester, and just wet. Just wet.
Yeah.
It's just wet.
I do love Dublin. It's a bit like Glasgow in that respect. I used to live in.
It's just kind of wet. It's really good city, really good crack. And I've been back since quite a few times. I've got cousins there and that. So that was that. So then I moved back to South London. And then sort of grew up, single parent now, and so as we go on, we're only 11 minutes in. I know that's a lot already. So
well, I just wanted before we sort of dive into all the development side, I know you've got lots of exciting stuff to talk about there. I just want to talk a little bit about what was London life like growing up, and then I know that you went on to study a little bit. So let's bridge the gap.
Okay. So growing up, and the reason why I count myself as an IC3 male is because, at the time I was growing up, there was something called Operation Trident. And this was the first wave of the police clamping down on sort of gun crime and that sort of stuff. It just meant that as a young man in South London, there was a lot of stigma. There was a lot of being very careful, and there was a lot of opportunity to get involved in a lot of unsavory stuff. And on the whole, I would say I didn't really get involved in that much stuff.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, like on the whole, and I then that's when I focused more towards doing a lot of youth work, working with a lot of doing a lot of stuff, and then I did a lot of stuff in the church and worked with younger people, doing that sort of stuff and helping people out. And that's when I first started doing schools work and doing sort of youth work and doing all that charity stuff. On the other hand.
And I know that your faith is very important to you, and that's something we're going to come on to. But I just wanted to call out a comment from Theo, who says, always learning something new when listening to Aaron. Totally agree. So seasoned, so diverse, so humble. One of my favorite property professionals. Yeah,
big up Theo. A lot of love for Theo. I mean, you could flip that and actually just say that for Theo. He's doing, per person per night. Again, innovative with contractors, put his head down. He's tried a lot of stuff. He's done estate agency, done stuff with the JV Hub, really, really hustled. Lovely family. Now after lockdown, I'm expecting more from that Theo twins this time. You don't keep Theo down in lockdown because
Yeah.
Anyway, but a lot of love. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Tell
us about your family, Aaron.
Okay. It depends what you want to know, and so I've got a son, Joshua. He's coming up 20 months. He's it was a blessing.
Yeah. And
I mean, at that age, they're not really saying much or doing much apart from just sort of growing every day and being
very cute.
just cute, and just it's always a sense of purpose when you look at him, and he's always happy to see you, and doesn't have any of all the rest of the baggage that we pick up through life. Which in a way has reinforced the way I've approached life. In terms of I look at someone, especially when they do something which, crosses my values or or as other people say, really grinds my gears. I actually imagine them as a 2-year-old. It's been one of the tools I do. I think, okay, this was once a 2-year-old child, right? Probably try share some tangerine that had been in their mucus with me, and this was a 2-year-old child. We put their hands up for me to carry them. What happened in between then and this person I have in front of me barking? And what that does is that slows me down and enables me to have compassion and to rehumanize them. And when you rehumanize someone, it then gives you tools to be able to deal with stuff in a rational manner.
Yeah, well, do you know something, Aaron? That has just reminded me, because obviously at the moment there's a lot to deal with, and people are afraid in lots of different ways. And partly, obviously, we've got the coronavirus, we've got everything that's happened since Floyd George, and with Black Lives Matter, and there's so much sort of ignorance, but also on one hand, but also hate on the other. And having the tools to be able to deal with that is so important. So tell us about some of the ways that you deal with that. And also, this is a great time to bring in your faith and how that helps you.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I had to say really early on in some of the conversations I was having, I know we were having other conversations, is if there's ever been a time where there's been something called a collective trauma, it's about now. So then so my mantra for the period is don't take anything anyone does personally, because it's a bit like grieving. People grieve in different ways. Some people bawl through the funeral and then that's it. And some people don't cry, and then one day, 2 years, they're just walking the dog by the kennel and they're beside themselves. Some people cry a little bit, sniff a little, don't say anything. Every now and again, a flash comes. Well, every human being deals with adverse situations slightly differently. So my whole thing around this whole thing is, my approach, I just want to take sort of Corona and this whole thing, is I looked at the legislation. The legislation in terms of the Corona bill, I've got it, is till 2022. Okay, it's got a sunset clause to 2022. So early on, when I looked at the draft legislation, which said 2022, right, that is a time period by which I'm assessing stuff. Okay, so I'm going to come back into how it affects personally. So that means that I was like, okay, I'm not stressing, right, because this is the time period in which they've set in law for a lot of the stuff, a lot of the powers. So that is obviously their thinking. They obviously think this is going to be an 18, 24-month thing, even if they're dripping it to the public 1 month at a time, 2 months at a time, 3 months at a time. So I adopted that from the start. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to really get stressed about stuff. And then that comes into what actually happens is people do not realize how much identity they get externally from the things, from the stuff, and that sense of certainty. And this comes into my faith and which in terms of my faith journey, I've been around a lot of nooks and crannies to come back to this place. So I was born a Muslim. I converted into a Christian when I was around 12, 13. As I went through my teenage years and through university, I became a bit more distant from my faith, and I explored a few different things in and around sort of like your personal development stuff. And definitely since my son came into the picture, I asked myself the question, what do I have to teach this other human being? What are the values? And how do I bring up a man? How do I bring up a man in 2020? How do I actually bring up someone who's going to be a contribution to society? And I look around in society, and society did not really have the answers in the postmodernist thinking. I'm going to be straight, not everyone's going to agree with me, right? What is the identity of a male? What's the identity of a man? And what is the identity? And the only place I could find that source in terms of something that hasn't changed for me in terms of solid values was back to my biblical roots and back to the Bible and back to the word. So from there, it's, bring up a man the way that he should be. So when he's old, he shall not depart from it. So in that journey, thinking, okay, I need to be responsible for this other human being. It's no longer about me, is actually what started and kicked off and strengthened my particular faith. Now, where it comes into situations of crisis is, like Jesus says, cast your burdens onto him, because he cares for you. So being able to pray and being able to know that ultimately God's in control, the outcomes aren't always going to be what I want them to be. That's okay. And I get my peace, because, you know, when we talk about it, it talks about God putting us in perfect peace and having the peace and having the gentleness and everywhere where I go for a moral code. And there's no point us beating around the bush. Currently, as it goes in there, whatever way you look at it, we're in a state of what I can only describe as moral flux. And I'm not going to go too far into this because this is a property show. But ultimately, people do not actually realize that with freedom also comes boundaries, rights, and responsibilities. Right, and that's because we've decided that everything is bad that we knew before, but we don't realize that when you take down fences, the first question you got to ask is, what were the fences there in the first place? And secondly, what are the fences keeping out? So yes, there are things that we can progress on, but for me, having my faith has meant that in this time I've stood solid through no matter what was going on around. And the other thing as well is also boldness, right? It's the boldness to actually have a point of view, irrespective of what society is saying, irrespective of what the popular thing is. We have shared a few things, and where I stand is not exactly where society says I should stand or where the common thinking is, because I make my own decisions. And just as the last point is, because a lot of people's identities I've found are in the sense of approval and being right and the external validation, is that they do not take the risk of being wrong. I don't mind being wrong as long as I've come to the decision. And that is something which that assurance and that faith, because it's not in me, is that I get from God, and that's where my faith works.
Great, thanks, Aaron. I just wanted to share Alexander Siri, who we all know, has just said Aaron is a legend. Yes, absolutely.
A lot of love for Alex. And when Alex says that, he might as well be looking in the mirror. He's one of my favorite people. To be honest, Alex, I've seen him all the way from in the forces to what exactly he's doing in this program, the consistency, the dedication, the learning, the compounding, the lives that he's changing. That's a lot of respect. So, and I also work out. I watch Alex work out, and I get a bit of a pump myself.
Yeah, I just watch the two of you work out, and that keeps me in shape. Okay, right. Well, let's do a fast forward. I'm really grateful for the way the conversation has gone so far, because I didn't really know any of that, as you said, and but when I speak to you, I can tell the foundations that you're not just on sand. You've got solid foundations. So let's skip fast forward then and talk to where you decided to get into property as an asset class. Tell us about that.
My pint of tea. Okay, so as I said, when I was at university, and I was DJing 6 nights a week. I was DJing in Sheffield. I was doing in Manchester. I want to be very careful here, because I have a lot of lost years in that uni period. So I already have my speech prepared, and this is it. If you're listening to this, I'm a changed man now. I was young. I don't know who you are, right? I was young. I'm old now. I've seen the error of my ways, and this is it. I'm looking to contribute to society. So I hope that's a massive disclaimer. So going back to uni, so I was a DJ. Then from being a DJ, I was a promoter. So I was a promoter and a DJ. Then the first thing I then did, when was making quite a bit of money, and was then I bought a nightclub. I bought a nightclub before I owned a house.
Wow.
Just mean, so I did have a couple of housing deals that, just one house, which I got into and quickly came out, because at that point I did not have the education. I didn't, so you could put on something and you could, make $5 grand, $6 grand in 4 hours of work, maybe 2 hours of promo, a bit of illegal posting. I know Alex is on here, but he's no longer in the force. You do flyovers, tie wraps, boards, motorway junctions, all the rest of the stuff, flyers on the doors, going to shops, all that stuff. You get in there, maybe a week's work, maybe 2 weeks. And this is pre-Facebook, really. Pre-Facebook. Maybe you got a few digits. Maybe I had an old Nokia that held 660 numbers. I think one of the ones I was using towards mid-uni was an 8310. And I had 660 or 665, which is all it held. But that actually meant that was 665 individual conversations plus the groups. So I think I estimated that I probably could remember anywhere from 500 to maybe 5,000 individual names and circumstances of the customers when I was a promoter. Okay, and that was what gave me a unique advantage, because I could basically see you around the campus. And you know, if you did go to the University of Sheffield, say between 2000 2005, and you're on there, you know someone, back me up. So and I'd remember you, I'd remember your circumstance, I remember what degree you were doing, and I'd remember that even in the third year. So I remember what hall you were in, what, you know, and then I backed it up with the way they actually stored numbers and the system and the process behind that. So going back to property, the very first thing that I was like straight all in was actually a nightclub. Right?
So, well, there's two things there, this memory thing, but I'm going to skip over that and go, how do you go from like you're promoting events, you're going out a lot, enjoying life, let's put it like that, being a DJ. And how do you go from there into, oh, whoops, I bought a nightclub?
Okay, so here's the thing. When I got into sort of promoting, you know, which I never really stopped from being in school and putting on the under 18 stuff, is when we started doing sort of like, you know, 3,000s, 5,000s in a club, 15,000 people coming through a roof, 6,000 in, they're paying £4, £5 a head. You know, that produces a lot of liquid cash. Okay. Then the second thing is you're in the industry you're in. And so the same way, so I was promoting, then I was DJing, then I was promoting again. And when I was DJing, like a DJ would come and probably charge anything from £100 if they want, 60 quid to 250, 400, 500 quid. So by me DJing, I saved us 500 quid, 400 quid, 300 quid. Right. So for example, you know, there's one of the nights was longest running. It was Tuesday night at a club called Crystal. It was called Billionaire. We used to have like, you know, footballers travel from Manchester to come down and splash and everything else. And I was DJing that night. For someone to DJ that night, it probably would have cost us 400 quid a night or 300 quid a night, because it was a premium night. So it was all logical. And then say, when we had the promo company, here was the thing. We went to one of the biggest student providers at the time, Unite. They've just been bought out. And we were like, hey, look, you have loads of new students come in. You have these people come in and they're just looking, okay, how can we entertain the students, right? So we're just like, hey, by the way, actually, we do events. Why don't we partner? So when people come into the city, they don't know anywhere to go. You know, they can come to us. Then we'll go to the clubs and we'll say, hey, by the way, clubs, we've got, you know, 5,000, 10,000 students in our database, right? We will bring them all here and they will come and they'll drink their vodka, but we can't pay any club hire. Then we'll go to the shops that were already offering student discounts and say, hey, by the way, look, we've got 10,000 students, whatever, you know, whatever you're doing. We know you want students in, right? Whatever student discount you're doing, just let us know and we will list it, right? But obviously we're going to have a sticker for our promo on your door. Then we'll go back to the big student providers and say, by the way, actually, we've signed up. Got 200 shops that are on here. We can provide exclusive discount for your students, but you have to pay us. Then we go to a student housing provider and say, by the way, we've got a few thousand first years in halls. They're going to want to come and live in your student houses when you're done, but you're going to have to sponsor us and you're going to have to, you know, pay us some stuff, right? So you have this ecosystem going. Right. And then that's almost how I got into property. And every single person that was paying us or we were paying for was there for something that was needed. Wow. So in terms of the ecosystem of everything else. So then we were already publishing for Unite. And then we also set up a publishing company. So we put 4 other publications in there. Serving, because we then decided we were like, we're going to work with people from 18 to 30, because at that point in Sheffield had the highest number of people that stayed behind after university, right? So we said, okay, we want to have someone, we want to be able to have someone and basically have them pay us for 7 years or 5 years, right? The average sort of student that you can get from a student is 2.5 years, but we said we wanted to extend that to 5 years. So we needed to be with them at every step. As they grew, we grew. And this is where the housing came in, because they need somewhere to live. In the second year, they need somewhere to live. In the third year, they need somewhere to live immediately they graduate. Okay. And then once their tastes move from early in the week, when they go into the student nights, getting, you know, those are quad. which was 4 vodkas for £1.50. I know Londoners wherever are falling off their chairs, thinking it must be some kind of magic. There's a quad. But then as they got older and when they started doing their masters and everything else, they started to move towards the weekend. So this is how I ended up owning bars and nightclubs and a bit swanky stuff in restaurants, because just keeping that in mind, this also enabled us to go to corporates. So we went to corporates and they want to open student accounts. They want to work with that. They want to sponsor that, your HSBCs, your NatWest. And, that's why we're the first ones to strike a deal with Nando's. Okay, so we started a lot of the Nando's, the student thing, got the chicken out, gave them, because they were thinking, these people could be customers for life. Okay, so this was how the ecosystem came in. So property was just one of the other things in there. These same people need to live somewhere. Right.
So, Aaron, this is so unusual. So there you are, going to university at the beginning. You're promoting, you're DJing. So far, that's a pretty typical thing. Yeah. But then, not only there's two things that are really interesting here. One is the ecosystem, and the second one is that you use those funds. It wasn't just coming in, going out, coming in, going out. You had the next level and you started buying assets. But so I just want to touch on both of them. So with the ecosystem, right? Yes. Was it a master plan? So you had the idea, right? Okay, I'm DJing, I'm doing this. How did it happen that you've just explained to me?
Okay, so here's the thing. There are a couple of really impressive young people in property right now, and a guy called Volta. Right, he's very impressive. And I'm thinking, I wouldn't say we had a master plan at the very beginning, but it became deliberate. And the reason why, so that there's myself and my business partner. Like, to put it bluntly, there were two young boys from South London who came to uni, right? And ended up, as people said, taking over the city, having multiple venues in the middle of the most popular high street, owning stuff, controlling, there's a point when we controlled all the venues at the weekend, the biggest venues. Like we're just two black guys from South London. And at that point in time, when we'd come to a club or something, people would ask if we were either, security or the cleaners. This is, facts. But there was some satisfaction thinking you don't actually know that you work for me, but it's cool. Do you know what I mean? And then have to radio in and, call one of our event managers or call one of those other things. It's fine.
I just want to just take a little bit of practical and then move on. So how did you buy the first nightclub? What I mean is you're doing what you're doing.
That's
how do you,
Right. So how we bought the first nightclub is it's a club that we'd promoted in before. It was the whole building was 40,000 square foot. The first thing we actually did was actually buy over the lease. It was, it was quite a long lease, and then refurb it. We actually teamed together with two other people, so that's myself and business partner, and we just put raw cash, just cash. Just nice. Cash, just flat, put cash down, and that's it was nothing long. You see, because we were just down and just doing stuff, we didn't know or stop. And I'll talk about my first encounter with the property education world is we didn't know or stop. All I was doing was actually I was doing economics. I had a side interest in marketing, side interest in business. And everyone else at the level that we were kind of operating in were just running it like they weren't running it with business plans. They weren't running it with avatars. They weren't running it with looking at hygiene factors. They weren't reading Minto reports. I was reading Minto reports because as a uni student, these things cost you $5 grand, 10 grand to subscribe as a business. But a uni student, you get access to all this stuff. So do you know what I mean? So I was looking at intelligence trends, all this other stuff, spending, household things. And that's when I actually started to move through the market, because I saw at some point people were going out 3.5 times a week, and looking according to the Minto report, they were going to be going up 2 times, 1.5 times, up until the time when someone's going out 0.75 times a week. How does someone go out 0.75 times a week? How is that even possible? Well, you get to the door and turn around. And there's another thing. So I'm going back into the property stuff, but there was another thing which we were moving with the times. When legislation changed, in and around, I've even forgotten what it is, that enabled bars to open later. I've totally forgotten what it was. The most key legislation. I could see that the particular way we're doing the industry was going to run out, because when you're 14, like if you're growing up like I did, girls, by the time you got to 18, some of the, the fittest girls, had been clubbing for 4 years already. No questions asked. You know what I mean? Going there, wink at the bouncer, all the stuff. Looking back, there's a lot of that stuff that's just not right. Okay. I just have to put that disclaimer, considering this is live. But just saying, hashtag, don't quote me. But look, so I could see, looking ahead, that aspiration, if you could go to a bar, right? Because the problem is last orders. I know that we're going to go back onto property, but I'll just stay with that. If you can go to a bar, all right, and you could stay till 11:30, 12, you could still be fresh the next day for lectures, allegedly. You could still go to work, everything else. You didn't need to come to the club, pay £5 to get in, and they paid 20 quid for a bottle of VK or Hooch or Smirnoff Ice, right? So I could see that. But if you were around 15 and 16 and you had 3 years and you're really like waiting for your 18 so you can get to a club, you're still mentally stuck there. But the next generation won't grow up with that. They won't grow up with wanting to get into a club, because the culture would have changed. The other thing as well is things like men's health started to come out, and it started to become fashionable for people to be fit, to drink water, to be vegetarian, to be all these other things, right? It sounds like but like those are healthier things. So I knew I had to pivot through the day and through health to move on. So property, how we got the first nightclub, it was just cash with partners.
Just one curiosity: how much
Yes.
did the nightclub cost when you bought it?
The first refurb cost 80 grand, and the lease cost 120 grand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. More than I thought, but yeah, go on.
So the other way around, actually, but that was it. So that was the first one. Okay. So going back to it, so property was just it was one of those things. It's okay. There's a lot of cash coming in. And just a brief story, I went out to China, went out to Ethiopia, tried to set up a couple of other companies, basically learned how to lose money in different currencies.
I love that.
But coming back to the property, so we're having these businesses making money. And it meant that, I had another couple of business partners. We could self-finance our refurb, self-finance the purchase, and then flip and move on without actually taking on much bank debt. So you refurb it yourself, you put the cash in, you buy it, and then you flip it out, bridge it if you had to, but with an assured exit. So that's how we were doing property. One of our business partners was like heavily into property, well, two of them. And so we just kind of got into it, because I realized that when I was 18, I remember going to a place called the Octagon, a night called Pop Tarts, and I saw this guy in his early 30s standing in the corner, sort of like black guy. And I thought, wow, what's that guy doing here? I'd hate to be that guy. And then as I started to come to, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm turning into that guy, because these 18-year-olds are seeing this guy around. I'm thinking, I am turning into that guy.
Yeah.
I need to get out of this game, right? I need to get out of this game. And so that's how I went from nightclubs to then restaurant, to then bars, to then commercial conversions, then house flips, then house splits. HMOs. I almost did it in almost exact reverse.
Yeah. Commercial first.
Up into the stuff that I'm doing now, which is some of the bigger developments. So there's a development of 22 flats which we're working on, and there's some other bigger sites of houses and every stuff which we're flipping on. But that's the kind of stuff I'm dealing with now. But it wasn't a massive master plan. Sorry, Steph.
And where are these? Are the developments all in one location, or are they all around?
Mainly in the north. Across Sheffield, across Manchester. I don't have stuff in London yet. But watch this space, because it's a whole different strategy.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about your strategy, or tell a bit about what you've got going on now. Your
Yeah.
strategy in the north, and then I'm interested to come back to your strategy in the south. The problem with you, Aaron, is you've got too much going on, if you don't mind me saying so, because also I've not been able to come back to China or Ethiopia, but I thought, do you know what, I've got to let them.
Yeah, we'll have to park that. As you probably guess, we could probably be here for a couple of hours. You know, I'm live, I'm good. And so let me pick something to start on. Okay. And again, I'm going to start left field. Is when people talk about strategy or business model in terms of how they approach property, I think there are two things that people often neglect. Where they're comfortable being in terms of exposure and who they are and the skills and what they're comfortable doing, and where they actually are geographically, okay, and how that affects what they can do where. Everything works in property, not everything works everywhere, and not everything works for everyone. Okay, so the season of life you're in, the resources you can get your hand on, even if it's time, people, and and there's an element of luck, but nothing at all works without focus and consistency. So different seasons, there's things I could do in the early and different seasons of my life that I can't do now. Okay, so
but we probably talk about that.
Huh?
But we said we wouldn't talk about
that. So like I went into, so I'm out of HMOs now, okay, which for some people that do HMOs, they think it's sort of silly, but the reason why I'm out of HMOs is I had HMOs in Sheffield, okay, and I moved out of Sheffield, right, fully managed, probably had about 80 rooms or something like that, fully managed, everything else. But then my property manager left with no notice, right? So I was in a different city, working on a few different deals, doing a development site, and then now I have to step into an HMO portfolio, which was a mixture of rent, lease options, and purchase, right? And I realized what a crappy job had been done, okay? And, I love people, but I don't like tenants. It's because you have to start early on to actually have hassle-free tenants. It starts so early. It starts with the stock. It starts with the stock. Then it starts with the picking. Then it starts with the culture. Then and there's some people who are just difficult personalities.
Yes.
So when you have a whole kind of portfolio full of bad uns and processes out and everything else, it's just like, I don't have time for this, right? I think and in the areas I was is there was a certain bit of saturation where you almost had to go harder or go home. What used to be a base standard has risen, so for every well-designed HMO room that I see on Facebook, I'm like, oh crap, that the bottom, as it was, is no longer the bottom. Some of the traditional older landlords who'd bought stuff for like £3 and a kebab, right? Then soon cottoned on. But no one was on spare room when I first started doing this stuff. You're very much in there. You have to innovate purposely, and you can't stand still. You can still make it work, and people are making it work. But that kind of young blood energy that I had, coming back to it, I just didn't have that energy anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like if you had to start again today, right, from scratch, in doing what you're doing, you'd probably take a slightly different route, because the sweat and the tears and the things and the refreshes and the replying to messages and the turn up to viewings and no one's been there, then the recruiting the manager that left and the processes and before you even get to the workman that you work with right now, and then then the tenant's complaining about rats, and you go there and you discover that they're pigs and they're hiding stuff from the cleaners, not letting the cleaners in, then having mold in the room and saying it's pouring out. But none of these are insurmountable. You just got to decide whether you want it or not. Because if you don't want it, you can't do it, right? And you need to know. So this is where I feel for any tenant
that called you and says, Aaron, I feel for any tenant who called you and says, Aaron, I'm locked out. No,
I went there with a smile on my face, and then I cussed in the van back and cussed in the way back. I had to sit in the van because I couldn't even get in my car, because when I'm negotiating with a tenant about rent, or they want something out, or they want me to pay for something or anything else, I have to turn up in the van, right? Standing, I'm like, it's hard out here, it's hard. Do you know what I mean? I had to stay in KFC and wait till they were putting stuff out before I could even eat to get here. You understand this? Do you know how much the banks are charging? Do you know how much the plumbers charging? It's hard out here. So
framing.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the thing. Having said that, if you have top of the range HMOs properly managed, properly systems in the right area, it's boom. It works. It's just not for me. I don't want it. I mean, Alex Seri was here earlier on, and I look at Alex's body. Not too long, everyone. But I'm thinking Alex looks good, but I just don't want it that much. The diet to get there, the diet in the thingy, the 5 a.m. gyms, out in Pure Gym and everything else. I'd like to look like that, but I know myself. I don't want it that much. I need to reduce a little bit of this. Keep cardiovascularly healthy, and I'm good with that. But nothing works without actually self-knowledge, self-mastery, and self-acceptance, and knowing what you really want. So then I also said, okay, what kind of profile? So I have single lets, right, in medium areas. But the other thing as well is in terms of the profile. So I long time took policemen, teachers, nurses, right. I want people paid by the government. Okay. I want people paid by the government, and I didn't know this pandemic was coming, but none of my rents were affected through the pandemic because everyone who stayed was getting paid. I don't particularly like doctors because doctors are not us, especially junior doctors, because junior doctors work stupid hours such that they don't keep the house properly, contrary to popular belief. And by the time they actually start to earn the big money, they get transferred, and by the time a wifey comes in, they just go buy their own stuff for their doctor's salary. So thought doctors, but some of the nastiest places I've had doctors in it. Nasty. So in terms of the strategy, single lets, okay, and buy to rent blocks of flats, and everything else in between, I look to move on.
Buy to rent. Oh, buy to rent.
Build to rent. Build to rent. Sorry.
Build to rent. Yeah. That's an interesting strategy. Yeah. Now, I just want to reflect on what you've just said with the single lets. Now, I was very interested when you first told me about that strategy with the policemen, teachers. I just Nurses. Like the way you end up so intentional when you were talking about how you did things. Everything was so intentional. You might have not thought there was intention from the age of 18. Then suddenly you've got this ecosystem, and you've brought people into the ecosystem that are not obvious. You've got a way of thinking that's a little bit different, that you can see things that other people can't see.
Oh, sorry, Steph. I mean, you might have another question in there, and that is one of the basic things. I always look at the second or the third question, or Elon Musk calls it the first principle. And when you're looking at consequences, you're looking at first, second, and third order. But I quickly realized how I was able to move is that we were not actually providing anything. We were meeting needs through vehicles. So I could swap vehicles to meet those needs. So that's why it seems kind of seamless. I'm a particular generalist, kind of like, this is my customer. This is how they need to feel. This is what they need. How do I provide that? So, for example, when we came into the bars, I did something that no one else was doing. I realized that the key ages, I'm going to come back to property, the key ages were when people were 21 and when people were 30. I'll explain. When they were 21, for the earlier weeks in terms of filling out booking rooms, they possibly, if they were kind of popular or something else, they had people in all the sports teams going down, right? They also had their mates who were around 21, whatever, who'd still come out, right? So they had a big group of friends. They were at their peak at uni when they were at 21. So 20, and also 21st, it's a big deal. They might have some extra fun. They might have friends travel up. So if we concentrated on hitting people on their 20th birthdays to have their 21st to us, we could have a pipeline and fill that with 21st. Then the next age was 30. Because someone at 30, depending on where they are in the organization, go both ways. They can have up to the 40-year-old managers come out who want to recapture their youth, and they can have the young people who want to impress their boss who will come out mid-20s, early 20s else. So they will also have the largest number of people come. And also at 30, if they were able to book a big party, they probably weren't married, probably didn't have a kid, or if they were just married, they didn't have any kids, and they were coming up to the peak of their disposable income without the other stuff. So I said, look, we're not taking any other things. We're just literally doing 21st birthdays and 30th, which no one else was doing. put everything else, put Facebook ads out, did campaigns, and just filled it 52 weeks rolling. And everyone else who came will either be either becoming 20, especially if you get them early in the year. So for example, you get someone who turns 21 at the beginning of the year, right? The rest of their mates, or say if they turn 21 in October, the rest of their mates are going to be 21. And everyone wants their own. So a few bespoke packages, give them a good time. Then you're also advertising to that. So that's what we did with 30th and 40th. No one else had done that.
Yeah.
Again, just by thinking properly.
Yeah, that is killer as well, because everybody who comes out for that party, you always spend more that night. You book more, you spend more, you enjoy more. So brilliant. So you moved up, you had your HMOs. I got to picture you as an HMO landlord chasing around all these 80 rooms. You disposed of your HMOs and you've moved into single lets, but you only choose certain tenants, police, teachers and nurses. But then you also started doing your builds to rent. Blocks of flats. So tell us the first time that you got into that. How did it come first, the idea, or did you have an opportunity where you thought of the idea?
So here's the thing. I was going to say, I thought this idea. I didn't really think of the idea. And again, I almost had to bring my thinking into line with what we're taught conventionally educationally, which is the right way to do. I know, Steph, you do some fantastic stuff in this space, which I wish I knew. I would have doubled down, superbly. How that came about was looking at a few things. So I was doing flips. So I was, flipping one, keeping one, flipping one, keeping one. And then I had a couple of flips that stuck a little bit. Every single time we flipped, we raised the ceiling in the area. So that means that I was always going blind, but on good knowledge. Right. So I was doing, even though I was looking at what had been sold, everything else, I knew because of my relationship with the estate agents. So obviously all the estate agents used to be able to get, free entry to the clubs. And I used to have someone take them drinks vouchers over the weekend or anything else, just to show my appreciation, which meant that I'm getting phone calls before stuff goes on the market. And when something sells that I miss out on, I know how many people have bid. I know what it's gone for before it appears on Rightmove. So when I get into the area, I'm acting on information which is months ahead of everyone else, because by knowing what it actually sold for when it went to a bidding and knowing how many people were prepared to pay at that price, I know where the demand is.
They don't teach that in the courses.
No, they don't. They don't.
No, good.
So that's the way I kind of approach stuff. And then again, so a combination of looking at local development plans, having a lot of conversations, seeing where some of the older money is. So, there are a few gentlemen who've been in this game for ages. They don't know why they do what they do. It's almost like in their blood. They've just done it for so long, right? They just know how to get around. They're doing it 50, 60 years. And you start to move around with them. At this point, what we also did at the back is, because we were doing all this stuff with young people and running, national campaigns, running Facebook ads, everything else, I also did some political work in the background, running their social media campaigns to a few decision makers. So it meant I was in a lot of rooms with decision makers, so I knew, what was going to be developed where, and some other stuff. I'm being very careful. We're live and this is recorded, but so I had a lot of intelligence, and this is actually, in speaking about this, something else has come out is the importance of data. And being able to not just have the data, but to act on the data in an impactful, purposeful, and profitable way. Okay, so going into the strategies, I just thought, okay, who's going to get paid, right? Who has a lot to lose if they default? Who cannot afford to have issues on their credit file or anything else? Who's going to be around but not going to be around all the time, and if they're in, they're going to be sleeping. That's how I started to come to that. And who's going to pay them? The government. The government's not going bust anytime soon, right? So this is how I came to it. It wasn't really super complicated. I didn't stay there like the Matrix. They'll get paid. They have too much to lose. More than likely, there's recourse.
Yeah. No,
things happen.
It's brilliant. I love it, and it's so simple. And also, I asked you about this because this came up. I was asking about coronavirus, the impact of, and you mentioned, okay, well, I'm not affected because I've just got teachers, police, and nurses. I says, what do you mean you've just got teachers, police, and nurses? But then you explained, obviously, you bought properties in those locations.
Yeah.
And you've got contacts within those organizations, and then one person is moving in, moving out, referring the next. So let's come on to the build to rent then. Oh, do you mean you're doing the build to rent flats for the teachers, nurses, and?
No, that was you see, this requires a pivot. That was towards the short stay market. Okay,
the build to rent for short stay.
Yeah, towards the short stay market, and with the ASTs being the fallback. Right. Okay. So I've still got one under construction. That's a whole different story. That's the one I was talking about. That's 3 years overdue.
Yeah.
And there are so many lessons. I mean, we haven't even got a chance to go on some of the lessons. But when I spoke earlier about my faith and being okay about getting things wrong, it doesn't affect who I am. I believe every single human being is unique, never duplicated. No, it's totally unique. This is why I'm not scared about competition, and I don't really I'll consider what you say, but it doesn't drive me. Okay, I'll consider what you say. I'll make my own decision, even if I exactly agree with you, but I will make that decision. Okay, I realize that people say failing forward when it applies to business, but they're too scared themselves. So I have some views which are not in step with society, but that's not my problem. Do you know what I mean? So when it comes down to looking at how I deal with problems, is I have lost a lot of money, right? I have made a lot of mistakes. And I struggle, depending on the day you catch me, as to whether they were necessary or unnecessary mistakes. Because you never know how you deal with adversity until you're in adversity. And you never really learn from adversity. You never get the lessons from adversity unless you've been in adversity. And it builds your character. And then again, I'll say, well, I could have gotten these lessons anyway. I could have read a book and saved myself that hassle. But it really, really, really comes down to, there are a few basic fundamental things that I believe that you should put a handle on. But before then, I just want to field any more questions, in particular to the property strategy. Let's get some property into this talk.
Well, I'm happy how the conversation goes, because Property Gamechanger is about you. It's about you in property, but it is about you. And I'm delighted to have learned so much about you tonight. But I am interested in, I've been really interested in the pivots, how you started. But I think the thing that we were talking about the build to rents, because you got one build to rent that was built. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it's not finished yet.
Oh, that's the same one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I suppose you couldn't have had, well, it's yeah. Do you want to say anything about that, or should we move on? Do you want to say anything else about it, or
off camera, probably?
Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about it off camera. I think what we can say is development's not easy.
I can't even. Here's the thing. Development is not easy, but development is also very, very easy. It's actually easier. Yeah. It's easier than single lets or easier than HMOs. And I'll explain why. It's because there's a certain level where the experts at that level also correspond. Right? So therefore, it actually goes from being a bit harder in terms of the commitment to being a lot easier and a bit more on autopilot. Because the people that are now turning up, you have a design meeting on a big development site. You have someone there with 30 years experience, PI covering hundreds of millions. You have someone there who's built bridges, who's built airports. You have someone there who's like designed the Shard. You have someone there, which is a little bit different from Tony, who was an apprentice 2 years ago, who's like, kind of doing your budge job. Then you later on have to go to B&Q to correct what your expert has done. Yeah. I used to have this joke in the design meeting where I was like, look, I don't care what you say. I just need to know how big your PI is, right? All right, so you got big PI, can cover it for millions. do your thing. I didn't go to uni. Do your thing, bro. Just do your thing.
Yeah.
I know on the development course, like, yeah, you're responsible for your development. I'm like, well, I'm responsible. I don't have a clue what you guys are talking about. I have no idea. I wasn't a civil engineer. I don't know. I just looked at this guy and said, does that make sense? And this guy says, yeah, it makes sense. And they argue, and I say, this guy said this, and then I go back and I just look and I Google and I try and learn what they were talking about. I have no idea. I'm cool with that. All I have to do is be able to spot someone a recommendation and know enough to know when someone's blagging me, and just realize that submitting to the process means that it's a learning curve, right? So it's much more expensive when you get it wrong in development, but it gets a bit easier because the quality of the people you're working with are better.
Yeah. Better teams.
Yeah. So that's it. So development isn't easy, but you should go gradually. You should do it. If I was doing it again, I'll build a proper pyramid, right? The reason why, there's two reasons why a lot of people get it wrong in development is they jump in too early with the wrong people because they're too eager, they're motivated buyers. And the second thing is they do not have enough from their pyramid to keep them going. So they're always in danger of losing their shirt. And what people don't realize is when you're stressed, your IQ goes down for up to 15, some people say 20 points. So you're actually dumber when you're stressed. So all that knowledge, all those books you read, all your rich dad, poor dads, when you're stressed, do you know what I mean? And then now you're getting trouble from your partners, and you're juggling your bills. You're not at your genius IQ Einstein best. Okay, so Presley runs something called slow money, and I think quite simply you need to just know yourself and take your time. That person that decided to like walk out one day, and then by the end of the week they had 8 houses and 3 airports. That's cool. The reason why you can hear about them is because it's not normal. They've done something extraordinary, right? Don't be average, but be extraordinary. But don't be ordinary. Yeah. Compounding. People look. Yeah, I just want to say, like, people look to think that they can get the speed to get what they're going. Number one, where you're rushing to, and number two, you need to get it from compounding, right? Rather than loads of activities. Sit tight.
And the thing is, it does go fast anyway. Yeah. I mean, the years. There is a saying, you overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 5 years. Totally true. You can totally transform your life in 5 years, 60 months, just by doing similar things over and over and again, but with intention and with that commitment. And you do get results fast when you put that intention behind it, because I think I've had many decades of no intention, and then after 5 years with intention, it's totally different, the results. So I think, bringing it to a close, it's been like such a roller coaster ride. We've covered so much. But what are the things that you would really, or is there anything that you'd really like to have covered, or question that you wish that I had asked you about that you would like to leave people with?
I just really want to just double down on a couple of things. Is you never go wrong with building your character. Your character is going to be the most important thing, and this lies into knowing your limitations and then deciding whether you want to expand them or whether you're okay with them. And it also dictates what you do in property. And secondly, it is your life. Don't run it based on the speed of someone's funnel. Don't waste time, but remember, it is your life. And if you want to go fast, if you want to do everything yesterday, you can try. Good luck to you. But if you want to take your time based on something that's going to protect your emotional health, right, while you're building your capacity, again, do that. But either way, don't stand still. God bless.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. And I wanted to just call out as well. I'm going to call out with 2 things. How do you think that being in property has changed the game for you and your family?
One of the most important things is being able to leave things that are solid, that someone can come and touch for other generations. And when you're in property, if you're doing it right, you're actually doing something that people need, people have always needed, and something that makes a difference. And there's one of the things which pleases me and irritates me at the same time, when you put people in a house together and they get on so well that they then move out together and then they leave you with 2 boys and a happy life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
but
you actually make a difference.
But you're out of HMOs now.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying this is one of the things, you know, it's kind of, it's like you actually make a difference. You change the trajectory of people's lives by what you do. And you can do that with property. People live, it's a home. You know, this is where they have their memories. This is where they come to rest. This is, you know, you're a bus stop on the journey of their life, and you've contributed something, and they lived at that address, and they can drive later with their kids and say, I lived there. And, you know, you're part of someone's life tapestry by what you do.
Yeah, and I know that as well as what you do for people through your property, you also give a lot of your time through your charitable works as well. So I just want to call that out and acknowledge you for that. And in closing, I just want to say thank you, Aaron, for joining us this evening, for being we have seen the incredible brain. Your story could not be encapsulated within an hour because there were just so many dimensions to it, and I feel that we really only touched the surface. But you've got an amazing journey and story, and the ideas that you have are just phenomenal. So we look forward to seeing what you're going to be up to next. So it's a thank you for watching and listening as well. And but from now, it's goodbye from Aaron.
Goodbye. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Goodbye. See you next week. Bye. Bye.